Jacksonville. I don't know if I should do cartwheels or jump as I come out here. Wow. The energy of the last two speakers that I was here to watch was amazing, and it's great to be here. And the voice of God that was going over that video clearly exhibits yet another example of why we know that God is a woman. Thank you, Donna, for that. It's a reflective time for me for so many reasons. I've ended this long career of things that I've done, things that have been attributed to me, and importantly, accolades that come up after you've sort of stepped away. And what's interesting about all that is it is all of that you hear and read is not at all, that's what I've done or what I did. And then as the old saying goes, it is not who I am. And I wrote a book last year, and in the process of doing that is interesting because you get to be reflective. And coming back now to Jacksonville after an extended absence, it's great to reconnect with a ton of people. As I walked around this morning, I got to see some smiling faces, and everybody's welcoming me back, so it's nice to be back in Jacksonville. But the point of that comment for me is there's an old quote from Tennyson's poem on Ulysses, and it says, "I am parts of all that I've met." A much longer phrase, but I can never remember it, so you get the short version. But what it means is, in essence, all of us are products, right, of our nature versus nurture, our environment, our parents, our friends, family, companies we've worked for. And it's an important part because a lot of times the things that you understand, that are the beliefs in you, the latent, dormant values that are inside you come from people that upon reflection, you look back, it's like, here's all the folks. And writing a book provided me that chance to go back and look and see. Because when you get to doing the things that I do, people ask, well, why did you do that? Why did you make that decision? How did you know to do those kinds of things? And as you reflect on that, it became clear to me that it's these people that I've met along the way that have had the good nature, the good decision to sort of help a young kid who had probably lost his way. As I reflected even more strongly on who those people are, I quickly began to realize that many of them, if not the most prominent ones in my life, were indeed women. And of course, my maternal grandmother, I was born in Mexico to a single mother who left Mexico to come to the United States to make a life for me and eventually get me. So my grandmother was this incredible person. She did not have a job per se. We did not have a home. But if you know the Latino heritage and tradition, familia is a word that just expands beyond the actual meaning of family. It means no matter where we went, there was somebody that opened the door for us. And so we roamed around sort of the northern part of Mexico for the first 8 years of my life before coming to the United States, as promised, my mother bringing me. And again, she left when I was an infant. So that first embrace, when she came out of that car and I walked down to meet, I didn't know who she was, right? I had no idea. My grandmother was my mother for all intents and purposes. But when that woman walked out and walked towards me, and you have that hug, and there's just no confusion about a mother's love for her child after the many years that I've been gone. And then, of course, third, and certainly probably the most important for the last, some 40 years of our lives, my wife, Kathy, who is in the room, I think somewhere over here. She asked me not to point her out, so I'm not effectively pointing her out, but she's over there somewhere now. Who has held our family together through so many different things. And so the values and principles and philosophies, because as I look at those three women and I see what the thread between them all is these incredible values that we individually value in other humans, A, B, wish we could be those things all the time, because all three of them had this incredible, simple approach to life. They really care about other people, simply. Anybody that knows my wife here, anybody that knows my mom or my grandmother, their attraction to a bunch of people around them was they're just a fundamentally good human being. I can trust them, they're always there for me, they'll always do things, there's never a bad word, there's never, like my grandmother, we went through, as we walked that northern part of Mexico, I remember holding her coarsened hand as we walked from village to village and took buses. Lots of difficulty. She had lost her husband at a young age, and she was on her own. Never a complaint, never a concern, never a bad word for anybody. So that's the environment that I came back. And as I look at my history and what I've done on the corporate and the business world, I can't help but reflect the fact that indeed the things that I did and why I've done them and in the way that I've done them have come from these incredible, powerful, in my mind, women that have nurtured that. So that's the quick backdrop to who I am as a person, not all the stuff that I've done. Donna asked me to come to talk about some of the stuff that I've done because I know that you guys are taking notes and want to be incredible, powerful leaders. And so I will expound on some of the things that I was able to do and how I was able to do them because as the mayor talked with the backdrop of her that said leading with heart, I can't help but feel that part of my success, if not a lot of my success, is indeed leading with heart. And in the art of negotiation, that's all you do in business, right? I have a long history of solving issues with unions, which are very difficult, and in bridging the gaps between divides of between nations and between people of opposing forces. And I've done it with some of the tactics that Victoria lined out, but mostly I've done it with the human values and principles that these three women in my life have provided to me. So, quick history, United. I left CSX in 2015 to run a company that was broken. It had 8 CEOs in the previous 10 years, and there was really nothing working in a company, so it was indeed quite the turnaround. Somebody asked me, why would you do something like that, and what were the most challenging things, and what was compelling about that? I think as most of you in the room will agree, it's oftentimes the stuff that's compelling and the stuff that's challenging is indeed what's compelling, and that was my drive to get there. But the way I approached the world, everything was broken. People were just, the company was anything but united, I guess, to use a phrase. Wow, that one doesn't always work. So you can imagine my first Wall Street Journal article. I've been around for a couple days and talking with people, and everybody wants to know how's it going. And they asked me a question, and one of the things that I'm known for is being pretty direct with my commentary, and oftentimes being direct with a lot of comments, especially in today's press, can be damaging. Speaking the truth, Donna talked about her being herself. It's in politics it's difficult, so congratulations to her. But I tend to always try to be as transparent as possible because transparency is the fastest path to trust. Think about the people you trust and why you trust them, because you can kind of say anything to them. No judgment, no anything, it's just that. And when you run what is indeed a 150,000 member organization in 80 different countries, where there is no factory floor, there's no room like this where you have 100,000+ people. Everything in an airline is onesies, twosies, right? A couple pilots, a couple flight attendants, a couple customers. And so there is no way to communicate your values to them other than actually reaching out to them. So one of the things that we talk about quite a bit about the turnaround at United is how did you do that? What was your first instinct? What did you have to do? Well, I know from a leadership lesson perspective, because we did a lot of that here at CSX, and Michael Ward was here earlier, and I said hi to him and thanked him for the chance he gave me when I first came to Jacksonville. But one of the first things you do in a turnaround is, in essence, try to figure out that one thing. Everything's broken. What is the one thing you want to start with and build upon everything else it's going to do? Determining what that first thing is probably the most important thing that I've been able to do. So how do you figure that out? Well, it's situational. So again, I am on an earnings call for all of you that know it. You're talking to your investors. By the way, of all the constituents in a company, the one that's your customers are loud and angry clearly your investors are the same way, but they're the ones that are most ardent about what are you going to do, right? It's a spreadsheet-oriented world, and it's a bit of a testosterone-filled world, right? You're going to cut people, you're going to cut stuff, you're going to shut things down. That's what they want to hear. What I learned from these women in my life is that you don't have to jump into anything. And this concept of listen and learn before you lead sort of began to resonate. I didn't have those phrases. By the way, when you write books, you have to come up with axioms like that because they're simple to remember. Listen, learn, I need to remember that. It's a really important one. But nevertheless, the actual meaning behind it is when I asked the question, okay, Oscar, what are you going to do? I said, I don't know. Yet. Now, you can Bloomberg stations, which monitor the tracking stock price at every second of the day. You can go back and look at it. Everything's going, and then I say, I don't know. So the expectation wasn't high. I said, I don't know yet, but I'm going to take the next 30 to 60 days to find out. Well, what are you going to do? And then I said the second thing that dropped the stock is like, I'm going to go listen to the people that actually run this business every single day. Our frontline, our essential workers, whatever BS term you want to use them, they are the heart and soul of a corporation. They're the people you see every day when you fly, flight attendants, pilots, the people below the wing that are throwing your bags around. That's a technical term, throw, not literal, but I'm now out of the business so I can say jokes like that. I'm going to go listen to them. Stock, like what the hell are they going to tell you? They're going to tell you they need more money, they need more stuff, and in a balance sheet, sort of spreadsheet world, that seems like more cost and not a lot of potential revenue. And so that's the thing. So I embarked on this listening tour. Now here's the magic of a listening tour. And I talk about this a lot, and I get a lot of pushback with a lot of CEOs. They hear the story, it's like, yeah, that sounds really great, Oscar. I mean, you got 100,000 plus people. How do you talk to all of them? How do you listen to them? How do you gather them? How do you actually get feedback? Because my questions when I went around, by the way I went about it is I just went into the field. I just walked into organizations, I walked in break rooms. An airport has a Byzantine sort of labyrinth of places where people rest, where people have their work time off. They have people, and so that's where I went. And the other thing about an airport and an airline is we work 24/7. There's at least 1,000 planes in the air right this very second, all over the world. So there's not a time where you can just sit there. It's like, well, we're taking a break now. Let's talk about stuff. So this concept of listening, meeting people where they are at the times they're there, was not something they had done. And so I have a whole bunch of history in my book that I wrote. By the way, I have to plug that. Book got there, thanks. The profound questions I would ask people were simple. I would walk up to someone and I'd say, oh, hey, Jane, how are you? It's like, I'm Oscar. Yeah, we know who you are. And I would notice something about them, whether shoes. I had 5 sisters, so I know how to do shoes and hair. Carolyn Sizemell's here. We used to work together. It's like, how do you always know my hair has been colored? Because I've learned to look because of. But I would ask a simple question about someone. Lanyards, lanyards, everybody tries to personalize themselves. Why? Because they're freaking humans. Imagine that. They have lives, they have opinions, they have views, and they have families to support. And in a world where they are, quote, frontline and a huge organization where it's everything about getting things on time and getting things out, and when you don't do that, the only feedback you get is, why the hell didn't that work? Someone like me, my instinct from these powerful women in my life, how they live their lives, is what just led me to say, I'm going to go talk to them and ask a really simple question. It's like, what's going on? What do you see? I see you have a Dallas Cowboy lanyard. And I would say something like, I hate the Cowboys, sorry. Go Jags. Pandering is something you learn too. And it's amazing how this concept of trust travels at the speed of transparency. Well, you sitting there talking one-on-one, one-on-two. It wasn't it wasn't gathering people so they could hear me expound on all my incredible philosophies and principles. It was asking them, about their families, how long they've been here, what their aspirations were, and guess what? All those things. They want everything we do. Right? They had no way or room to negotiate. Sure, their unions did that, but they had nothing to do with that. So they live in a world, as one person said on this listening tour, I am just so tired of always having to say I'm sorry, she said to me when I asked her what she felt was wrong. What did she mean? Well, she's a flight attendant. The flight's late. I'm sorry to you. Does she have anything to do with getting planes out on time? No. The coffee sucks. I'm sorry. Does she have anything to do with choosing? I'm sorry you can't bring your peacock on board. Amen. Not her policy. And for me, that was the fundamental sort of founding. Remember that one thing, that one platform thing that we're looking for? I began to quickly realize that no amount of investment, strategy, big, sort of profound changes were going to change the very basic thing that I was finding. We had lost the trust of everyone, but more importantly, we had lost the trust of our employees. The very people that are supposed to provide you this concept of the friendly skies, out the window. So when the Wall Street Journal asked, what are you finding out? I said, disenfranchised, and disengaged, and disillusioned. The big 3 Ds. You say that on the Wall Street Journal, guess what leads the next day? New CEO says, And the second question was like, well, Oscar, you've been on the board all this time. How could you have not known that? And I said, you're absolutely right. We were completely unaware of that situation, which tells you how much boards weren't that necessarily engaged. And boards don't run a company. So that, of course, got a whole bunch of headlines, including from my fellow board members that I used to be on. But again, it's the truth. And who it resonated with the most was the employees themselves. They began to feel like they were part of a solution. And by the way, this concept of listening, another push I get from leaders, like, oh God, Oscar, you know, if you're gonna listen to all these people, they're gonna tell you all these things, and how are you gonna do all of that stuff? You're going to disappoint them. This thing up here, proof not promise, is a powerful thing because I didn't say thank you for that specific feedback and I'm definitely going to fire those 4 people or I'm definitely going to do this or that. It was always thank you for your input. As you know, I am out walking around talking to everyone, trying to ascertain, trying to learn, trying to understand where we start first. And whatever that first thing is, it is probably, in fact, highly likely that it is not going to be the thing that you have told me today. But just know that all of that is part of the broader parcel that's beginning to form this concept of our change mechanism. And so you don't have to worry about people telling you something, you have to do something. If indeed you're genuine with them, they trust you. And so this company that had been, the employees had been sort of set by the bar, all of a sudden having new folks. And it was not easy. I had people very angry, yelling and screaming at me, and we've heard this BS before. And I would say, really? 2 o'clock in the morning, Houston hangar, true story. I jumped on a picnic table in front of 800 very angry, mostly men, that fix airplanes. So a blowtorch, you know, a blowtorch and a hammer. That's what their approach was. I learned that from the railroad business. How do you fix things? Blowtorch and a hammer. These aren't college educated folks, not knowledge workers. They're just, again, this concept of basic human beings who are just here to take care of their family, and they want to do a good job at a good time and to be provided the tools. And when you mess with that over a period of time, yes, they get angry. So my answer would be, it's like, really, the CEO of the company has been here on top of a picnic table, yelling because the mic didn't work, asking you the very basic question. It's like, where can I start first? And that began to resonate in the company, and that created this wonderful flow, because 100,000+ people, no, I did not talk to all of them, not even close. But guess what happens when you treat another human with this level of caring, leading with heart, not a negotiation, not anything other than you. How do they feel? How do you feel when somebody approaches, right? It feels good. And what do you do the next thing somebody says, well, I heard this guy new CEO, he's a piece of crap or whatever. It's like, oh, you know what? I just saw him. I just talked to him. He stopped in and said hello. He asked me, you know, he seems to not like the Cowboys or whatever it was that said. That human approach really worked. So that's the process. So I got this big listening tour. I'm heading back to Denver, and we have big meetings. Oh God, big meetings coming up. I've got all the heads of the unions together. I got my board, my management team. Wall Street is coming. They all want to know what I've been doing out there listening to all this stuff and what's the magic quote. Now, I began to have a sense. I talked to that flight attendant, and it's like, we need to regain the trust of our employees. That is my thing. But how do I convince people? Because that is also not on a spreadsheet, right? How do you do that? How do I convince people? How do I convince my leadership that that's where we're going to start? So that's the progress. So this is 37 days into the job specifically. The number's important because the next morning when I got up to go do my thing that I was going to do and have to convince, after capturing hearts and minds of people down at the lower level, I got the really tough chance of all the mucky mucks in the world that are going to want to know something much more. Right? I want to do this. So that morning was fateful for a lot of different reasons, but specifically I, after a run, came back to my apartment and had a massive coronary event that a pretty damn near terminal heart attack, where I think the doctor's opinion was, when my family finally got to Chicago, and said his heart has suffered a major insult, meaning the entire left heart, on the side of my heart, had blown up. And the fact that I was alive was pretty spectacular. And my outlook for continuing this work, it was very in doubt. Doctors had a lot of viewpoints, most of them negative. And of course, when you're a public figure of that sort and you disappear, because indeed I disappeared, I was supposed to come to work that day. I wasn't there. I was living in Chicago. I was just there in a rental apartment, and I was by myself. So when I get whisked away to the hospital, no one knows. No one. And I didn't have it, And of course, everybody needs to know. So the press all of a sudden starts hearing rumors, something happened. I can't talk to the company because I'm in a medically induced coma, by the way, for 7 days. 37 minutes after 37 days, 37 minutes from when I called 911, I was on a medically induced coma and on life support, or ECMO. It's a heart-lung machine. So yeah, I was in no stage. Although on the way to all of this, I kept muttering something, and Dr. Flaherty, who's I'm a USC guy, he's a Notre Dame guy, so we have this debate all the time. I kept mumbling something. I got information so I could call Kathy, and she was about to go on a walk with her friends, and just the phone, the landline never rings, and it was the hospital telling her, hey, you need to get up here, and they couldn't tell her anything more, so she knew nothing. And Dr. Flaherty said, you kept muttering, you got your name, rank, and serial number, you kept muttering something else, and because I leaned closer to him, he tells in his speeches, he kept saying this one thing over and over, I don't have time for this. I don't have time for this. And that is so me and so a lot of you, by the way. So yeah, that happened. It resulted in me having a heart transplant a few months later. And by the way, if you get a chance to read the book goes through this, and I don't have time for it today. The miracles in my life, from the EMTs being like literally around the corner when I made the call, to Dr. Flaherty and other people scrubbing for something else, getting this information, knowing they had to take care of me first, to receiving the notice that there was a heart available for a transplant on the morning of my birthday. We were having a strategy session at work where we were going to determine this first thing we were going to do, remember? And I'm trying to I'm trying to get my leadership team to buy in to that concept of what we had to do first. Not at my urging, not at my direction, but at their awareness and their understanding and their incredible support. Partly because I didn't know what was going to happen to me, but secondly, ladies and gentlemen, that's how you get things done. I know there's always a leader who gets all the pluses and the minuses, but it's motivating, energizing an organization of that size to follow in this one sort of normal path, this one path forward, the North Star, if you will, is not an easy thing, and it doesn't happen by dictum, it happens by consensus. So as I get the call that morning that the heart is there and I don't have to go till later, what are you going to do, Oscar? It's like, well, we're finishing up this meeting. I'm going to go to the meeting. Again, you laugh, but all of you would do the same thing. And right before we broke for lunch, the consensus of the executive leadership in United Airlines came up with the fact that the first thing we needed to do was regain the trust of our employees before we could do anything else. All together, in one way, they were right behind it. Right before lunch, I stood up. I had this device called an LVAD. Think of Dick Cheney. But don't think of me as Dick Cheney. And I said what were, in hindsight, magic, weird, scary, creepy words. I said, hey, I got to go back to the hospital. I got this thing I've been waiting for. Again, when you're a public, you can't talk about these things openly. You just can't, because the press, your stock price, everything gets affected immediately. They knew I had had a heart attack by then, and I was recovering. I was back in the office, so everything had flattened out. Dropping this bomb was not going to be easy. So I said, couldn't say much. And then I said these magic words, I will see you all on the other side. And it was like, and as hindsight, right? It's like, oh, which side is that? But thankfully I made it to the great support of so many people. My family was incredible. Throughout the process of my recovery, the doctors kept saying, he's not going to make it. You need to prepare yourself. My wife and kids saying, you don't know our dad. And like a lot of you, I would have that level of support. So that happened. And it's unfortunate that it took that kind of medical event to really, truly unify the company, because the divide that was in the company, we had merged two companies together, all of that was still evident. Our unions were so far apart from us in contracts. We began to work on a process that was healing, led by certainly, I don't give credit to my heart attack, but certainly was part of the equation, but mostly that listening tour. When I was in the hospital, the amount of letters, notes, cards, placards, things you could go across the room from people from as far off in the world as all the many countries, all signing things with, get well, get back, we love you. I had not met 90% of those people. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the power of leading with heart. It's the power of connecting with people, the power of building trust through transparency. Whatever trite, thousands of books are written about this thing. There's only one method of building trust with another human being, and that is personally and directly, and it's hard as hell. And we have to make those efforts in order to do the things, and that's what worked for us at United. And it came to be in so many different ways that it benefited. The company began to skyrocket. If you know stock price, our stock was at 48. We went to 98 at its height before COVID. Stocks in the airlines have never moved. To this day, they haven't moved that much. So we created something special, not only on the human side, but on the business side. Our NPS scores went up. We developed a product. Our people became friendly again. And that's the turnaround story that is United, and a brief view of how I did it. Like I said, it's hard, and there's bumps along the way. Your family. My wife, Kathy, had to be at home shouldering the burden of what should be two parents and raising what was then a high school-age son, who at his age, and he's an athlete, and we always talked about heart, the heart of the lion. And when Dad's getting a new heart, this kid is confused. Like, by the way, there's no difference for the people that know me. An organ is an organ, scientific. How you accept that organ and how you go forward is a whole different thing for most people. But he had to learn that, and she had to shoulder that burden. I thank her every day for those sorts of things. But it manifests itself in so many ways, and I'll talk about a very serious event. We call it Flight 3411. All of you in the room know about this, the time when a passenger was beaten and dragged off an airplane. I don't shy away from that conversation because there's nothing to shy away from, right? You live and you learn the most from the stuff that impacts you the worst, unfortunately. Our biggest failures sometimes are our best lessons. So the simple situation there was, you saw the videos, and it's all United all of a sudden. My initial response, for a lot of different reasons, was horrible. But mostly it was not United employees involved in any bit of it. It was the Chicago police that were involved in the altercation. It was an airplane and an airline that we used as there was all sorts of good reasons that basically said, not me, not us. And the lawyers in the world, the corporate communications people in the world, I said, you got to tell everybody. And our initial response has got to make sure, no, it's not us. Well, that didn't work out too well. We are the first. We've checked. We're the first viral, and it was on Twitter then, now X, where this stuff goes out, and we had no idea what that meant. So it was kind of just put that down and learn very quickly what viral means. So the punchline for that is it's bad, and it's getting worse by the minute. I became globally infamous. I think there was 800 million views of that video in China on their Weibo platform. So it wasn't just here and there, it was everywhere. Again, and I'll finish with this thoughts of these incredible women in my life. The night before, so I spend a day with all the experts in the world of how to effectively go on a morning TV show with 30 million viewers expected to watch another CEO sit there and squirm under the lights and try to wiggle his or her way out of culpability in any way, shape, or form. They're telling me how to tell the story that it wasn't United, it was all these other people. So in essence, you would be pointing the finger, right? Remember what I told you about my grandmother and her beliefs, and my mom and my wife and what they're not? So that night, as I go through all of that, and I'm getting ready for this big event, everything's riding on it, right? Think of the pressure. It's like my company, my heritage, because being who I am, I was like, well, people like that can't run companies, clearly. The work that we have done now, we're 2 years into this, and a company's rocking. We are moving and hitting on all cylinders. Our family was at a big philanthropy event the night before, raised the most money for American Heart Association in history, and so we're flying high. And then this happens, and in 2 or 3 days, my world comes from there to just lower than low. That night, before the Good Morning America show, I get up And I'm, of course, not sleeping well, as you might imagine. You can imagine the pressure of all of this, and what am I going to say? How am I going to say it? They're going to be after me. There's going to be follow-up questions. What have they taught you? What are they? Somehow, I began to think of my maternal grandmother. And that trite phrase, what would she do? She would not blame people. She would take full, see, all those things. And I thought of her, and I was on my knees looking upwards, not because I'm a pious person necessarily, but I think Lincoln said it. I looked up because there was nowhere else to look. And it was truly one of those moments in life, and you'll face some of these moments, and I hope this helps in some way, because there's nobody around to help you with this. It is you and only you. It is your latent, dormant values that have been instilled in you by people in your life throughout, where you're going to have to rely on nothing but those sorts of things. And when I had that moment, I did feel a bit of solace. I still didn't go back to sleep or anything. But I went on TV, ready for this, and everybody's coaching me here. I think she's going to come with this first. She starts with her thing. I said, how can this happen? How did you feel? And I said, it was horrific, and I felt sick to my stomach. Like, ooh, again, things on TV, right? That's going to lead. And then I said, what are you going to do about it? I said, it all rests with me. I let the policies and procedures of running an airline get in the way of doing the right thing for another human being. And that should never happen, period. Funny things. Her earbud is going off. You can hear it from across the room because, right, the producers are like, oh, he's going to say something. We're going to come back with this. We're going to make him sweat and look all this. But the funnier and louder gasp, because I could hear it more perceptively, is my legal and corpcom team somewhere in the shadows. Like, he's not supposed to say that. But here's the punchline. It is never too late to do the right thing. The truth always sets you free. And the news cycle, what could they do? They tried to come back. You're right. My fault. I let the policies proceed. It's like there's nowhere to go. And then quickly led with a concept of, here are the 10 things we're going to do in the next 30 days to ensure that this never happens again in our company. People want to blame somebody. They want to beat someone up. Great. That's but they also want accountability, and then a plan. There's a certain major aerospace company that I've been asked a lot of questions recently about that is not following that, and you see how that just perpetuates forever. So me taking the blame wasn't easy, because guess who was my most ardent critic of that response? Remember those 100,000 plus humans that I gained the trust of, and my transparency, my listening? They wanted to know, what the hell? Why did you take the blame? Why did you not say the truth about everyone else, right? I had to explain to them that it wouldn't have mattered. The public, the proverbial horse is out of the barn, right? All that stuff. There was no way to shut this thing down other than I learned this, and I learned this back at CSX. When we broke something, God darn it, we fixed it, period. There was no, oh, well, and all this. No. You hurt someone, you break something, just fix it. And that will carry you a long way. And we regained the trust of our employees. The news cycle died down. The company went on to great stardom, continues to do the things that are difficult in an airline industry. But more importantly, the legacy you leave is this concept for me of proof, not promise. If you find the United employee that was there when I was there, and there's less of them nowadays because of COVID, and you ask him, you say, hey, I saw Oscar. You're going to get a couple things. You're going to get a smile. And this is not pandering or self-aggrandizing for me. I feel very strongly about this legacy. They smile, and they'll have a good story. I met him. I took a picture with him or something. I did not meet everyone, and I did not take a picture with everyone, but everyone feels that way. But more importantly, this concept of proof, not promise, did he ever not deliver something that he promised? And they won't find a person inside of a large, massive organization like United that'll say anything but never did. Now, mind you, I was careful about what I promised. But nevertheless, these are examples as you lead your lives, your careers. Heart helps. Caring helps. There's an old saying, I don't know where I heard it, but that all great civilizations first fall apart from within. Think about that as we enter this political season. Think about the divide that's in our nation. Think about, I can't help but think of that phrase. And for you individually, there's so much you can do. Listen and learn, care, and more importantly, just remember that this world, this planet, we're all here together. And I'm so great, Donna, that you do this for us and for this kind of group of people. And it's happening all over the country. Gosh darn it, I know this country cares about our future. And you're all part of this. So I hope this energy, this conference, all these incredible array of speakers help you along your journey towards doing the same thing and doing your own contribution, leaving your own legacy of leaving this place better than you found it. Thank you for having me.